Campus madness, fireworks on Capitol Hill as presidents from Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania were grilled by lawmakers over anti-Semitism on college campuses. Elise Stefanik posed the same question to the presidents, asking each, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying or harassment? Watch their response.
MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking, specifically calling for the genocide of Jews, does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill.
Meanwhile, students at the various represented schools joined congressional Republicans in a press conference to attest to some of the things they say their classmates and professors have said to them.
Swiftly denounced the incident, and yet our president cannot. Because the glorious October 7th, and you're a dirty little Jew, you deserve to die, are words said not by Hamas, but by my classmates and professors. And because despite all of this, I am adamant and hopeful that we will not accept, least of all embrace, this horrific new normal on college campuses today.
But while the focus of yesterday's hearing was on anti-Semitic incidents on campuses, friend of the show Glenn Greenwald highlighted that there have been a number of anti-Semitic comments that have gotten a lot less attention on various protests for Israel. For example, here in this tweet, he says, should university administrators allow speech of this kind on campus, or should they ban all such views and punish any students or student groups expressing them? All right, what do you make of this?
So I watched some of the hearing. There was a lot of, I saw anger toward the university president's answers, including from the members of Congress grilling them. So I actually don't have any problem with what they said, because they're right. There are and should be broad free speech protections given to the students and to the faculty, and you can make under a now. I mean, the campuses don't have to exactly follow the First Amendment. It's a little bit complicated. If it's a public university, it does. If it's a private university, maybe it does because it gets funding. In any respect, they've promised to follow free speech principles, so they've said they're committed to doing it. So they should be held responsible for that commitment, given that they take money from the students to attend. So you can say really hateful, anti-Semitic, even genocidal things, and if it's aimed at a frankly a broad enough group, it will not be considered specific enough to qualify as harassment or a threat. That's just true of statements in general. I mean, I could say, I'd like to kill, or I wish we're dead. You know, you could substitute any group of people, and that would be a protected statement. If I start saying specifically a specific person, Breonna Joy Gray, and here's how I'll do it and at what time, then it's not protected speech anymore. So they're outlining something that exists in law, and their own policies state, discriminatory harassment is unwelcome and offensive conduct that is based on an individual or group's protected status. Discriminatory harassment may be considered to violate the policy when it's severe or pervasive and objectively offensive, creates a work, educational, or living environment that a reasonable person would consider intimidating, hostile, or abusive, or denies them equal participation in the workplace or the educational institution. So So there are arguments there that it's context specific, and if it's just words said, so just chanting, it's probably protected. If you wrote a statement on someone's blackboard on their dorm room, that would probably be targeted harassment, and it is context specific, is accurate. I'm sorry that's so annoyed Elise Stefanik, but it's accurate. Now, but I will say, I think part of the frustration that is justified is that, I've covered campus free speech issues, incidents for like 15 years now. And I have seen over and over again investigations and suspensions against students and against professors on the mere whim that someone was offended, the mere suggestion.
Can you give an example?
The universities themselves create bias response systems where if someone uses the wrong pronoun for you, there's so many, I've covered tons of cases.
I'm just asking for an example of someone who's been suspended or expelled because they used the wrong pronoun or said something anti-black or anti-Asian or whatever, or anti-gay or whatever.
There was a student who on his test, you're supposed to fill in the name of your professor and wrote the wrong pronoun for the professor and was given an F assignment for doing that and had to appeal it and said, well, I don't have.
Okay, but I just want to be really specific.
Well, there's an example.
Right, but I asked if there's an example. They're talking about whether or not these people should be, you mentioned specifically expulsion, for example. So
the State University of New York gave guidance to professors that they would suffer consequences if they continue to use gendered salutations in emails to students.
But there haven't been. Because I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on what I think we made a lot of really good points there.
Yeah.
But you did say that there were tons of examples of people who have suffered these enormous consequences.
There was a student at the I can't remember the university who put a sports sign that was. I can go back to my archive to find.
I don't mean to challenge it. But
so many.
Here's why I'm bringing it up, because I haven't been in college for a very long time, but my experience is there was regular open debates about whether black people were intellectually inferior, genetically inferior to white people. A law student that I went to college with named Stephanie Grace famously had an email that she had written to a friend of hers leaked. There were no black people involved in that link. Her friend was white. She's white. But she had said something to her friend about how she was debating black people's genetic intellectual IQ merits, and that she would like to believe that she adopted a little black kid, that they would be as smart as her little white peers, but she had her doubts and it didn't seem to be panning out. You should read her words for herself. But that sparked a whole debate. There were innumerable debates about the legitimacy of black kids on campus through my entire educational experience, and never once were any of those people censored, held accountable, anything like that, and nor do I think that they should be. It was a horrible experience. When that Penn student was standing there, he talked about how he wished he could focus on his exams and get on with his life, but he had to engage with that. I resonate with that feeling because I remember in the middle of exam period being tasked with responding to national media requests over that Stephanie Grace story as a part of the Black Law Student Association. So that resonates with me. But the point that I think is really important here is that I think what the university presidents were getting hung up on was the idea that anybody was actually making those genocidal statements to begin with. So I think that some of them jumped. The first president said, "Well, nobody's making those statements in the first place, but here's what our policies are." Fair enough. The next two should have just said that, but instead they basically what seemed to be happening was they were assuming that by genocidal statements, I think that Jews shouldn't exist or whatever the genocidal statement was. That Stefanik was alluding to statements like, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, which obviously there's a debate about whether or not that means exterminating all Jews or whether that means from the river to the sea, Palestinians and Jewish people, Arabs and Jews, should have equal rights under the law, which does not currently exist in Israel. And so I think that they were saying, they were wanting to resist validating the idea that those genocidal statements were being made in the first place. And in the same way that there's that famous example of, if you're asked, why are you beating your wife? Even if you've never beat your wife, that being out there creates a kind of reality that people don't necessarily want to validate. You know what I mean?
Yes. There have been a number of, I want to make clear that I do have examples, number of professors, we've talked about some of them on the show, using the N-word in English literature discussions or in language discussions. There was one professor who used a word, in what language, that just sounds like It was, thank you, it was Chinese. Sounds like that word. It isn't. And he was punished by the institution. It does. FIRE right now has 1,000 open cases.
So let's dig into this. What is the alleged statement from, this is very important, what is the alleged statement from a student or a faculty member, similar to the very specific example you just gave? Whatever you feel about it, rightly or wrong, you have an example of a statement that was made. Has there been, in any of the reporting that you've looked at, or in the testimony that we just saw that young man from Penn give, a specific statement that is attributed to a specific person, maybe a professor, that should be investigated? Because what I noticed, the reason that I wanted to pick that part of the clip was that individual made the following allegation, the following very serious and very specific allegation. He said, I'm sorry, I'm just pulling it up on my Twitter wants to be really slow. He specifically said that both his professors and fellow students have said, quote, "You're a dirty little Jew, you deserve to die." Now, I strongly agree that if a professor or a student, but especially a professor, was heard saying, "You're a dirty little Jew, you deserve to die," that absolutely there would be professional consequences, and there should be professional consequences. Now, before we're reading the student guidelines and the professor guidelines are two very different things. Professors should absolutely not be teaching at an institution where they are saying something as vile as that. But why is it that there's a congressional hearing where this young man is going to get up and be able to make that kind of an accusation without saying who the professor was? Do you remember what professor said something like that? I'm asking why it is that when we have video that we aren't able to play because we don't have permission to it, but the video that was included in the Glenn Greenwald tweet features pro-Israel protesters saying, "Kill all Palestinians, all of them, not one left from the river to the sea. Palestine will be deceased. We got to wipe them off the face, off the effing map." And I'm talking about flattening them like a parking lot. That's evidence. You can do what you want with that evidence.
What's
you can say someone
what?
should be sanctioned of specific statements caught on camera that people have said that you can feel one way or the other about. But as I've been reading about the allegations of what's going on in Penn, calling for an intifada. Intifada means resistance. It means rebellion. So absolutely that should be protected speech. I don't understand why that's being characterized as hate speech. Yes, people who are in an occupied territory are going to call for their own liberation and for a revolution. The American Revolution isn't hate speech. Apartheid revolution isn't hate speech. The Haitian Revolution isn't hate speech. This isn't hate speech. So what are the specific examples that are being put forward?
Hate speech is a made-up category. I'm not going to refer to any speech as hate speech.
But in violation of school policy.
Well, I don't think any of this is in violation of school policy. I don't care. The statement he's describing.
You're a dirty little Jew would definitely is in violation of somebody's
because that's targeted at a specific person. I mean, this is different. Specific. If I call you that,
no.
Then that's what the university professors are saying.
Right, but that's not what that kid was saying. That kid wasn't saying someone's pointed at me and called me that.
He said my classmates and professors have said things like that. And he also said that, and that they said glory to what happened on October 7th, which is totally, as I've said multiple times, in keeping with the sentiment of pro-Palestinian activists on college campuses.
It's keeping with the sentiment of people.
Today we witness a historic win for the Palestinian resistance, referring to the events of October 7th.
Let me finish, Robbie. A lot of people made statements like that. Wait, I'm validating what you're saying.
Yes.
Give me the space to agree with you, Jesus. On October 7th, October 8th, people were saying things like that. Norm Finkelstein, who has gotten a lot of viral attention right now because of how compelling he is, has talked about how he also, when the facts were not out and it seemed like this was a resistance movement and nobody knew how many civilians had been killed, made statements like that, which Norm Finkelstein, I can't speak for every student on campus, but Norm Finkelstein, who again is the son of Holocaust survivors, revised when he realized the gravity of not the legitimate kind of military revolutionary act, but the actual attack on civilians that is in no way validated under international law and cannot be characterized as a revolutionary act.
All right, well, I would have deleted this statement from my website then if it was just a misunderstanding.
But the point of the matter is
their mind had been sufficiently changed. I don't think they've changed their mind about it.
Okay, well, this is an important point. We now have, what has happened actually is that students making anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab comments have not gotten the same kind of treatment. We had almost every congresswoman out in front of Congress doing a vigil for the lost Israeli lives. We had the 5 or 6 members of the squad at a vigil for the now 15,000 Palestinians have been killed using American bombs in Gaza. You have 3 Palestinian students literally shot one paralyzed permanently, wait a minute, below the waist as a consequence of anti-Muslim hate, anti-Arab hate, anti-Palestinian hate, and had a 6-year-old stabbed to death as a consequence of it. But what Congress is doing is allowing a student to come forward and put forward unsubstantiated. If he can substantiate it, God, please, I hope he does, because no professor should be allowed to make those kind of statements in my view. But making unsubstantiated claims at the same time that Congress is passing legislation that says anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So in a world where the United States Congress, we know they believe that being critical of Israel is the same thing as being anti-Semitic, then how can you credit someone who's saying abstractly that people are making anti-Semitic statements when we know that to so many of these people, anti-Semitism means saying anything critical of Israel?
I know that, and there's something, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. I'm done with this segment. Fine, whatever. Okay. More Rising after this.